right now, at this exact moment, if you were standing on this tiny patch of land in the middle of a South Atlantic Ocean, you could not leave. Not because you forgot your passport, not because you couldn't afford a ticket, not because a storm cancelled your flight. You couldn't leave because there is no flight, no airport, no runway, no regular passenger ship, and no guarantee that any vessel is coming soon. The only way on or off this island is when a supply ship, fishing vessel, or research ship happens to make the long journey across thousands of kilometers of open ocean. Miss it, and you wait, maybe weeks, maybe months, as the Atlantic stretches endlessly in every direction. The nearest continent is Africa, nearly 2,700 kilometers away. South America lies even farther beyond the horizon. For days at sea, there is nothing to see, except waves, clouds, and an ocean so vast it makes the world feel empty. Then suddenly a volcanic mountain rises straight out of the water. A towering cone scarred by deep ravines, cliffs nearly 2,000 feet high, black beaches battered by relentless waves. A place described by visitors as both beautiful and forbidding at the same time. At first glance, it looks like somewhere humans were never meant to live. And yet they do. Because while the ocean crashes against those cliffs, breakfast is being served. Children are getting ready for school. Families are checking the weather. Neighbors are talking over fences. People are heading to work. Ordinary routines unfolding in one of the most extraordinary places on Earth. Around 250 people call this island home. A community so remote that, for much of its history, ships arrived only occasionally. Sometimes people waited months for supplies, sometimes longer for mail. And when visitors finally appeared on the horizon, the entire settlement would rush to the shoreline to see who had come. This is Tristan da Cuhna, the most isolated inhabited island on Earth. A place where isolation isn't a feeling. It's a fact. And what happened here in 1961 was so dramatic that every single resident abandoned the island. They thought they would never leave. A story that transformed this remote volcanic outpost forever, and explains why the world is talking about Tristan da Cuhna once again. Most places can be explained by what surrounds them. A country, a coastline, a neighboring city, a highway that connects them to the rest of the world. Even the most remote towns usually have something nearby. Something that reminds you civilization isn't far away. Tristan da Cuhna is different. To understand this island, you first have to understand the emptiness around it. Open a map of the South Atlantic Ocean. Find South Africa. Find South America. Now look between them. Right in the middle of that enormous stretch of water sits a tiny speck of land. A place so isolated that the nearest inhabited land is more than 1,300 miles away. For thousands of kilometers in every direction, there is almost nothing. No cities lighting up the horizon, no chain of neighboring islands, no busy coastline. Just endless ocean, day after day of open water. The same horizon, the same waves, the same vast blue emptiness. For generations, reaching this island was so difficult that mail sometimes arrived only once in years. Ships came when they could, and sometimes they didn't come at all. That isolation shaped everything. The way people lived, the way they worked, the way they saw the world. Then, out of all that emptiness, something extraordinary appears. Not a gentle island, not a tropical paradise. A volcano, a gigantic volcanic mountain, rising straight out of the Atlantic Ocean. Its summit climbs nearly 8,000 feet above sea level. But even that doesn't tell the whole story, because most of the mountain remains hidden beneath the water. What you see above the waves is only the very top, the visible summit of something much larger. Early visitors described it as a lonely rock. Others called it a place of desolation. Approaching from the sea, the mountain seems to rise directly from the ocean itself, with no gradual transition between land and water. Just dark volcanic slopes emerging from the Atlantic. And somehow, at the foot of that mountain, people built a community. Not cities, not towns. One settlement, a small cluster of homes squeezed onto a narrow strip of land between the mountain and the sea. A place where everyone knows everyone, where arriving ships become major events, where the outside world can feel impossibly far away. For more than 2 centuries, people have chosen to call this place home, creating a life on a remote volcanic outpost that many visitors struggled to believe was inhabited at all. And that is what makes Tristan da Cuhna so remarkable. Because this story isn't really about an island. It's about what happens when a small community decides to build a home in the middle of nowhere. Getting here isn't a flight, it's a commitment, a serious one. Most visitors begin in Cape Town. Then they board a ship, not for a few hours, not overnight, for an entire week, 7 days crossing one of the emptiest stretches of ocean on Earth. And once the South African coastline disappears behind you, there is almost nothing left to see. No landmarks. No islands, no passing cities, no lights on the horizon after dark. Just the endless South Atlantic, day after day. Passengers spend their time reading, talking, drinking coffee, or standing on the observation deck watching the sea roll past. Some days the waves are so high, they block out the horizon itself. Spray crashes across the bow. The wind howls across the decks. Albatrosses glide effortlessly behind the ship, while the ocean stretches away in every direction. The isolation starts to feel real. You begin to understand just how far away this place actually is. Then, after 7 days at sea, something appears. At first, it's only a shadow, a dark shape against the sky, easy to mistake for a cloud or a trick of the light, but slowly it grows larger and larger, until you realize you're looking at Tristan da Cuhna, a giant volcanic peak rising straight out of the Atlantic Ocean, not surrounded by other mountains, not backed by a coastline. Just one enormous mountain standing alone in the middle of nowhere. For centuries, people approaching the island struggled to describe what they saw. One visitor wrote that the peak appeared above the clouds after days of searching through fog. Another called it a big lonely rock. A missionary arriving in 1922 described staring at it through cold rain and mist, feeling as though she was looking at a somewhat awful desolation. And honestly, when you finally see it for yourself, you understand exactly what they meant. After a week of nothing but ocean, the island doesn't feel real. It feels forgotten, like a place the world left behind long ago. A dark mountain emerging from the mist, waiting alone in the middle of the Atlantic. The island feels unfinished, raw, untamed, as if the Earth only recently finished building it. Black volcanic rock, towering cliffs, powerful southern ocean swells. And above everything, Queen Mary's Peak. The mountain dominates every view, every conversation, every horizon. Here the volcano isn't scenery. It's the reason life exists at all. And one day, it nearly ended everything. But before that happened, we need to understand how people ended up here in the first place. The first Europeans found Tristan in 1506. And then they left. The seas were too dangerous. Landing was nearly impossible. For 3 centuries, nobody stayed. Then something strange happened. A handful of people arrived and never left. A Scottish soldier, shipwreck survivors, sailors tired of wandering, families seeking something different. One by one they stayed. Not because life was easy, because life here was meaningful. And slowly, a community was born. Today, nearly everyone on Tristan traces their roots to only a handful of families, which means something remarkable. Everybody knows everybody. Not metaphorically, literally. Every face has a story. Every family shares history. Every funeral, every wedding, every birth belongs to everyone. Imagine living in a place where nobody is anonymous, where every face is familiar, every family name means something, and every person you pass on the road already knows who you are. A place where children don't just grow up with brothers and sisters. They grow up surrounded by cousins, uncles, aunts, grandparents, and generations of family history woven into a single community. That place still exists, right here, Edinburgh of the Seven Seas, the only settlement on Tristan da Cuhna, a village so small and so remote that the rest of the world feels impossibly far away. Yet, despite the isolation, life here feels surprisingly familiar. On any ordinary day, children head to school just as they do anywhere else. Friends gather on the football field. Neighbors stop to talk. People discuss the weather and the sea. Someone is fixing a fence. Someone else is checking on family. And somewhere, laundry flaps in the Atlantic wind. Dogs wander through the settlement, finding warm places to sleep. People come and go without much ceremony. A knock on the door is rarely a surprise, because everyone knows everyone, and everyone depends on everyone. What makes Tristan remarkable isn't that life here is completely different. It's that life is so ordinary. The same routines, the same friendships, the same small frustrations and daily responsibilities found almost anywhere in the world. The difference is where it all happens, because while these everyday moments unfold, beyond the last house lies the South Atlantic. Thousands of kilometers of open ocean. No neighboring towns, no nearby cities, no highway leading somewhere else. Just one small community carrying on with everyday life in the middle of nowhere. And perhaps that's what visitors find most surprising. Not the isolation, not the volcano towering above the village, but the simple fact that in one of the most remote places on Earth, life still feels like home. Then came October 1961. The month that changed Tristan da Cuhna forever. At first, the warning signs seemed almost harmless. A strange column of smoke appeared above the island. Then came the steam. Day after day, the signs grew harder to ignore. Deep beneath the village, the volcano that had shaped Tristan itself was waking up. For generations, islanders had lived in the shadow of the mountain. It was part of everyday life. Children grew up looking at its slopes. Families farmed its land. Entire family histories were tied to this tiny patch of rock in the middle of the South Atlantic. But now the mountain was sending a terrifying message. It was no longer protecting them. It was threatening them. Imagine spending your entire life on one isolated island, knowing every path, every house, every face, then suddenly realizing that the very ground beneath your feet wants you gone. As smoke drifted across the landscape and fears of a major eruption grew, families faced an impossible decision: leave everything behind or risk losing everything. People began packing whatever they could carry: a few clothes, family photographs, precious keepsakes collected over lifetimes. There was no room for much more. Children were forced to leave beloved toys behind. Farm animals were abandoned. Homes that had sheltered generations were locked for what many feared would be the final time. Nobody knew what would happen next. Nobody knew if their houses would still be standing, or if Tristan itself would survive. Within days, the evacuation was underway. One family after another boarded ships and left the only home they had ever known. Not a handful of people, not most of the population. Every single resident, the entire island community, gone. The village that had echoed with voices, laughter, and daily life suddenly felt silent. Doors remained shut. Windows stared out over empty fields. The roads and paths that had connected neighbors for generations were deserted. For the first time in living memory, Tristan da Cuhna stood completely empty. An island abandoned to the forces that had created it. And as the ships disappeared over the horizon, many islanders wondered if they would ever see their home again. For most people, this should have been the happy ending. The British government brought the Tristan Islanders to England. Suddenly they were surrounded by things that had always been scarce on their tiny island. Modern housing, reliable services, better access to schools, better medical care, opportunities that simply didn't exist on a remote volcanic island in the middle of the South Atlantic. On paper, it looked like an upgrade in every possible way. After all, they had just escaped a volcanic disaster. Their old homes were thousands of miles away, and nobody knew if they would ever be able to return. But something happened that officials never expected. Many of the islanders hated life in exile, not because England was a bad place, but because it didn't feel like home. On Tristan, life revolved around a single village. Everybody knew everybody. Families had lived side by side for generations. People looked after one another. The community was so close-knit that visitors repeatedly remarked on how interconnected island life was. Then, almost overnight, they found themselves in a completely different world. A world of busy streets, strangers, schedules, noise, speed. Imagine growing up in a place where every face is familiar, where every neighbor knows your family, where a walk through the village means stopping to talk to people you've known your entire life. Then, suddenly finding yourself surrounded by thousands of people who don't know your name and don't even know where Tristan da Cuhna is. The islanders had escaped a volcano, but many couldn't escape the feeling that they had lost something far more important. The sense of belonging they had always taken for granted. The peace and tranquility of home. Years later, islanders would still speak about that pull back to Tristan. Some enjoyed aspects of life in England. Some even returned later. But for many others, the longing never disappeared. Because for the first time in their lives, they were surrounded by people. Yet they felt completely alone. Two years later, Britain made an offer. Stay, start a new life, become part of modern Britain. Most people would have accepted. Tristan did not. The islanders voted, and overwhelmingly chose to go back. Back to isolation, back to uncertainty, back to a volcano, back to home. Because home isn't always the easiest place. Sometimes it's the place that understands you. Survival here requires cooperation. Nothing demonstrates that better than fishing. The ocean provides nearly everything, especially one species, the Tristan rock lobster, a delicacy served in restaurants thousands of kilometers away. But harvesting it isn't simple. There is no major harbor, no massive fishing fleet. Boats launch through crashing surf. Timing matters, experience matters, trust matters. Because one mistake here can have consequences. The sea feeds the island, but it never lets anyone forget who's in charge. The same isolation that makes life difficult for humans has created something remarkable for wildlife. A sanctuary unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. Stand still for a moment and listen. No traffic, no car horns, no distant hum of highways, no sirens breaking the silence. Just the sound of the South Atlantic. Wind sweeping across open grasslands. Waves crashing against black volcanic cliffs. And above it all, birds. Endless birds. Millions of them. The skies, coastlines, and surrounding islands support some of the most important seabird populations on the planet. In many places around the world, wildlife has been pushed aside by roads, cities, and development. Here, nature still feels in charge. Along the coastline, northern rockhopper penguins gather in huge colonies. Their numbers are so great that entire stretches of shore seem alive with movement. Far overhead, albatrosses ride powerful ocean winds with effortless grace. They circle above some of the most remote waters on Earth, crossing vast distances that seem almost impossible to comprehend. And perhaps most remarkably, some of the species found here exist nowhere else. Evolution has been working in isolation for centuries, creating wildlife that belongs uniquely to this corner of the world. That is why scientists continue making the long journey to Tristan da Cuhna. Not because it is easy to reach, but because places like this are becoming increasingly rare. They come to study ecosystems that remain astonishingly intact, to understand how wildlife survives in one of the world's most isolated environments, and to observe a natural world that still functions much as it has for generations. In an age when almost every place on Earth is connected by roads, airports, and constant communication, Tristan da Cuhna feels different, untamed, unhurried. wonderfully wild. A reminder of what the world looked like before humanity reached every corner of it. And then the outside world arrived. Not by ship, not by airplane, by satellite. For decades, internet access on Tristan was painfully slow. The island sat thousands of miles from major population centers, and digital connections reflected that isolation. Then modern broadband arrived, and almost overnight, daily life began to change. Students gained access to online learning opportunities that had once felt impossibly far away. Families could make video calls instead of relying only on messages and waiting. News, information, and ideas traveled to the island faster than ever before. For many residents, it felt like a small miracle. A community once separated from the world by vast stretches of ocean was suddenly only a click away. But every new connection brought a new question. What happens when the world's most isolated community stops being quite so isolated? Can a place stay unique when the rest of the world is suddenly within reach? Can you connect to everything without losing the things that made you different in the first place? Nobody knows the answer yet, because Tristan da Cuhna isn't reading about that story. It's living it right now. Throughout this journey, one question kept returning. Why stay? Why choose this life? Why choose distance? Why choose difficulty? The answer isn't economic or practical. It's human, because every person needs somewhere they belong. And belonging has become surprisingly rare. On Tristan, people still know where they fit, who they are, where they come from, and perhaps most importantly, who would miss them if they disappeared. That kind of certainty is becoming uncommon. Maybe that's why this island fascinates us. Not because it's remote, because it reminds us of something we've lost. Stand here long enough, and the scale becomes overwhelming. Thousands of kilometers of ocean, one volcano, one village, 250 people, a tiny community surrounded by one of the largest wildernesses on Earth. And yet, they don't see themselves as isolated. We do. To them, this isn't the end of the world. It's simply home. Today, while much of the world is rushing somewhere, Tristan slows down. The fishing boats have returned. The day's work is over. Lights begin to glow in the windows of the settlement. Families gather together for dinner, sharing the same routines that have connected generations of islanders before them. Above it all, the mountain stands watch, silent, unmoving. A constant presence in the lives of everyone who calls this island home. Beyond the shoreline, the South Atlantic stretches into darkness. No neighboring cities on the horizon. No distant glow of highways. Just ocean. Thousands of miles of it. And somewhere in the middle of that vast expanse, a community of around 250 people prepares for another night. People who know their neighbors. People who know the landscape around them. People who know exactly where they belong. Maybe that's the real reason so many people are fascinated by Tristan da Cuhna. Not simply because it's one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth, but because it offers something that feels increasingly rare. A powerful sense of belonging in an age where the entire world is connected. where information travels instantly across continents, and where millions of people are searching for community, Tristan remains a place where home is more than just a location. It's a shared identity, a shared history, a shared way of life. And perhaps that's what makes this tiny island so remarkable. Not its distance from the world, but the strength of the connection between the people who live there. And if a ship left tomorrow, would you stay or would you go?